Initially, it sounded impossible. I think the idea of building your own home was extraordinary at the time.
I was homeless. I was at that time living in a spare room at a friend's house.
I was in desperate need of some housing.
We went into the housing office to apply for the waiting list.
It's a waiting list.
A lot of us are in council properties, and at that time they weren't even suitable, or they're either too small, or you're in a tower block 20 floors up in the air.
In a tower block with pigeon everywhere, no garden, the estate, the atmosphere around there.
We had heard of a scheme that Lewisham had initiated, which was about self-build. The housing co-op Chisel had decided that they really wanted to investigate that as a way of building alternative housing for local people.
We've got a scheme, we've got a plot of land. If you're on the council waiting list or you're homeless, you can build yourself a house depending on your housing needs, and you get discounted rent.
And it was looking at the water seagull method, where you were building houses, timber framed homes that were sustainable and affordable. It was the kind of alternative ideas that we were looking for, and we were really excited about the possibilities.
The big idea, was this genius of his for reducing design and architecture to its essentials in a way that enabled ordinary people to build for themselves.
It was entirely designed for laymen. It was drawn and conceived so that with no knowledge you could understand how to make plans.
I'd always wanted to build my own, but it goes back to finances again. It goes back to money and availability.
How does a guy like me, just an ordinary Joe Snow or whatever guy, not doing nothing special in life, get the chance, especially in London, because I'd only been in London a few years previous to that, get to actually build his own home?
In the late 80s, I was a single mum with 2 children. Actually thinking about how I was going to get myself onto the housing market, which was kind of extremely difficult at the time. Fortunately for me, I came across a group of people who wanted to form their own collective, which they called Fusions Jameen.
Eventually, I think we went to Lewisham Council. We went into the housing office to apply for the waiting list. And it was in there that we saw a leaflet for Fusions Jameen Housing Co-op.
We're living in Lewisham short life homes, and Lewisham had claimed back their short life homes. So the next thing for us now was to form that structure and to see if we could apply for what was then Housing Association grant money.
Thanks to Chisel, which is a secondary housing co-op, a brilliant man called Opina, he found a way to use a normal housing grant for these kind of schemes, which hadn't been done before. So he developed the community self-build for rent model. Each self-builder individually would sign their own self-build agreement with the co-op. And then the co-op, and then that individual self-build agreement said that if they followed all the instructions of the co-op and they gave their 24 hours a week, every week, then at the end of the scheme, there would be granted a self-build tenancy, which meant that they would get the self-build discount 30% below the target rent, and in addition to that, their children would be able to inherit that discount, and if we built on time and we built on budget, then some of your rent would go towards building up what we call a premium. But this is quite important, that the premium was only going to be released when you left the house.
I had no idea what to expect. Like I say, it just fascinates me that you could get to build your own place, and in the borough that I lived in. I was interested in meeting the people and just finding out, basically, here and there from them, how they got the whole process going.
As somebody who was born in the Caribbean and actually was brought up in a home that my parents and grandparents built, having that same approach here seemed like, you know, how on earth were we going to get this done?
The thing that really struck me though is that there were children here. There were children of the builders were here, and it provided a great atmosphere. It felt instantly like a community of people, all working towards the same end.
It was great to be involved with so many different people that you wouldn't normally meet in life.
We all started off as not so much friends, but acquaintances, let's say, and that was strengthened as we moved along.
Made some really good friends, and I had a fairly nice space for a single guy with not lots of money and stuff like that.
Working as a co-op brought a real sense of collectiveness, and that meant that everybody was there to support each other.
Cooking for ones and ones on site, even though you know there's work going on, but somebody had the responsibility on a rota system to cook for the group, so we all took it in turns, you know. Experiences like that just don't go away.
So community self-build is about improving the self, the individual, through a community process. And it comes from the African philosophy that the individual reaches their best through community, what Desmond Tutu calls Ubuntu. This concept of Ubuntu is also reflected in our co-op name. Fusions Jameen is a Kenyan term for the coming together of people. It's a creation of community.
I think confidence was a big benefit. Meeting people, architects, housing, gave me a lot of confidence with people, professional people.
How to communicate with professionals, how to, ask for something and actually get it.
We had to learn to speak to people within the local authority. We had to learn to speak to people within the housing corporation. We had to set ourselves up as a friendly society or a company limited by guarantee. So there were all these other things, which was, which allowed you to really build a sense of pride and confidence.
Self-improvement is definitely about self-improvement. As you go along, you realise that you have skills, but there's skills that you pick up along the way that you never would have imagined that you would have needed or needed at the time.
I developed more kind of toughness, more like persistent muscle where you just kind of keep going. I mean, when it was hot, it was really hot. When it was cold, it was awful, muddy, rainy. And we just kind of kept going, trudged along. You'd work long days, it'd be freezing before like the shell was on. You just kind of kept going.
So having had the dream of successfully building my own house, I then got more confidence and the leadership skills to do more self-builds, to establish a community land trust and to build a genuine partnership with our local GPs.
Having my own space, my own home. There was a garden that came with it. It's something that I would have never think, because to me, that's part of a home. It made me feel particularly good because I felt like I was providing a home for me and my partner.
I can tell you where I put a screw in wrong. I can tell you where I cut a joint wrong. I can tell you the wonderful home that I've made for myself, but it's without all of that effort. It's all of that effort and commitment. That's what has made it a success.
I learned a little bit about house building.
Learning to read technical drawings or site specs was a great thing. As I said, learning to use the power tools.
Just basic plumbing skills or basic electric skills. Just how to read an architectural drawing. I
would say I was at my utmost fitness at 34, building the self-build. It took me a while, but after a while I could lift up a whole door by myself and fit it. So yeah, I was very, very fit by the end of it.
The highlight for me was when all my frames were built, and of course they have to be built flat. And then comes the day, then that you're site manager and everybody believes that everything is set and ready to go, and there's it's almost like a big reveal. But what you do is what you have as well, because it's the whole experience is hugely collective experience. So while you are building, there are also people of your extended family, which are friends, and they all get to hear about it because you go to work or you go to a class or whatever. You're just talking to people about this amazing thing that you're doing. And then there are certain times, like lifting of the frame, where you could say, why don't you come up? And there'll be food, because we cooked for each other over the weekend. And you invite people over just to come and be part of that. And so you'd have, tens of people coming along, and everybody would just lift these frames together. And for me, one of the most amazing things was actually listening to people who had been on the site for the first time and just participated in lifting the frame, but the impact, the experience that they took away from that was a really fulfilling experience. And also that was the first part of like, wow, and you're just realizing that something's going to come out of this. Like one day these are going to have walls and windows and I'm going to be living there. So that was, I think, probably one of the most exciting moments for me.
People I've met through the self-build are some of the wonderfulest people I know. Very close to my heart. Their ideas, their eco, which was well above and well in front for the time, which is all very apt now. I mean, I'm proud to be sitting in an eco-friendly, every bit of material, including the varnish, is eco-friendly, and that makes me feel very good about my footprint of the ecosystem. So that in alone and everything else is just a wonderful experience.
I enjoyed climbing, being on the roof, watching like the houses come up from like just mud to frames to all the sides and the windows. I mean, it was a long process, but it's amazing watching a house being built.
You've got a dream to build your house, yeah? But this is about a community process. So the contract isn't you're going to build your house. The contract is we're building 13 houses. That is where the fundamental challenge is.
I mean, it had lots of ups and downs. It was really challenging. It was a disparate group of people. It was a co-op, so there wasn't really a leader. So there was lots of arguing, you could say, head-butting, disagreements. People were doing their own things and going their own way.
A lot of people wanted to go off script, as we say, and trying to keep the team would be one of the biggest challenges we did face. Also, some of the rules around the scheme, once we were on there, our hours, our duties, our responsibilities, I think we would have learnt by making them a lot tighter before we entered into the actual building side of things.
We had a self-builder who was struggling with his own hours, really charismatic, and he managed to convince 3 or 4 other people who were also struggling with their hours to stop building, and that put the whole scheme at risk. And with all self-build, there's always a consequence, so we had to get them to face the consequence of their action. What we then said to them was, okay, if you're not going to do your hours, the consequence is you can stop building, but you're going to have to go on a higher rent. And with that higher rent, we use that money to pay for some professionals to make up for their hours.
Because once the walls went up, I think people's focus changed slightly.
The biggest challenge of a self-build is that you have to do this work consistently for at least 18 months. And you don't know what your life is going to be like. You're doing it for the future of your kids, for the future with your partner. You don't know how your partner is going to respond to the fact that you have to make sacrifices in terms of time.
It turned out to be quite hard work. There was a lot of sacrifice because I was working full time, and the building thing was mainly done at the weekend, a few evenings.
And you've got to fulfil those hours. That becomes the challenge.
Managing your children, managing your family, and being able to put in the hours, because there were allocated hours you had to commit to on a weekly basis.
Time management was one of the greatest challenges.
Right.
And keeping people together.
Yeah, it wasn't easy because once it got down to winter, you know, and you're working outside, and those winters seemed like they were colder back then. You'd have to pad up, pad yourself up with some extra warm thermal clothes to actually be out on site all day, Saturday and Sunday. It was initially just to do 35 hours. One of the criteria that we had was to do 35 hours a week on site.
Personally, the challenges for me was the building in the winter because it was cold and it was miserable.
No, I mean right now, which is a shame really. I think of the time and the effort put into creating the dwellings here. 30 years nearly, and we can see the neglect in these properties, the neglect in terms of timber, is softwood. And you're working with softwood in a porous climate that gets wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. To me, it's like this is being done deliberately, because if they can run down the properties here, then it's like our future has been nipped in the bud because somebody has a visualization of something big being put here, knowing that it most probably could accommodate 30 families rather than 4 families. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
And I just think that's where we might lose out, because chisel's not the same chisel that helped us to start out the project. It's not the Jose Españas that we knew back then. Yeah, so it's a bunch of strangers, as far as I'm concerned, who don't know anything about self-build, even though they might know about housing.
Our landlord at the time was trying to remove our self-build discount, you know, and I knew that we had legally binding agreements. The landlord claimed that they'd lost all their agreements. They're trying to cover over the financial trouble they were in by the poor mistake by removing our self-build discount. They're joking. We've got legally binding agreements, and we're going to stick to those, and we're going to make sure that they recognise that it's self-builders earn the right. They've got that.
You do have to ask yourself, do I want to build a house which I will never own? You know, I mean, wherever you stand on home ownership and all the rest of it, it's a question you have to ask yourself. Is it for me? It's not for you. Be realistic about it. To my mind, you get something a little bit different in that you get this, you get allowed, you get what feels like a proper home, something that you can, your foundations of your family.
I've always wanted to own something. I always wanted to own this, even though in a sense I have owned it, or I am owning it, but it's just having that concrete guarantee that it's mine and it will be mine forever.
For me, it was just that knowing that at the end of all of this, you'd have somewhere to live that you can say, yeah, I've done that. I'd do it again at a heartbeat. I'd do it again at a heartbeat.
I suppose the people that were involved, especially the people that did it for a long time, could be very proud that they helped to build houses, their own houses to live in. Their relatives, their children could also be proud about their achievements, and hopefully they should have a legacy based on what their parents did.
The whole thing makes me happy. The entire experience makes me happy. And the thought that I would never, had it not been for this scheme, it is highly unlikely that I would be living in accommodation such as this. I'm in a detached home which was built and designed, partly designed by myself. I was able to kind of invoke in the build essence of my childhood in the Caribbean, which was just beautiful. I have green around me. I have a garden I have green space around me, and I now am a grandma, and it means that my grandson is also getting the benefits of this lovely accommodation that I have.
I set up another organisation which was followed on from all the lessons that we learnt here, called the Downham Community Land Trust. And what that now is doing is creating more opportunities for people to build, but this is more like things around tree houses for the wider community. So we're looking at that, and we're working with the local schools, quite a few of the local schools we're in partnership. We're looking at building them tree houses, tree classrooms. They can do that. We're creating a forest school, building a nature reception centre. We're looking at Heritage Lottery invited us to look at where we have a £10 million bid. So we're working with the local council to see whether we can do up the local pond, build some tree houses around that project's called the Green Woman Oasis project. And then we're working with the local doctors in partnership with the local doctors, and we're looking at the Downham Health through Sport, leisure and nature strategy, and that's going to use all the green spaces we've got in the area, and we're going to build a lot more timber frame healthy living centres. And it's all about maximising the input of local people, showing local people what's possible, creating a lot more local employment, and then the local people can get involved in both the design and the build.
Because after doing this, I went on to open up my own women's maintenance company, Maiden Art Maintenance. And I traded for a good few years with that, with quite a few of the young women on this site. And I had up to 11 employers at one point, and that was really a good experience. And I think I only challenged myself with that through the knowledge that I'd gained through the self-build. Also, my eldest son, has built his own house now and looking towards building his second. So I'd like to sort of say that I had some sort of influence there for definite.
It was a dream to build my house, which I'd had from when I was a young kid, so it was fulfilling a dream. That sense of community, the fact that you did something together, the fact it's a beautiful house, you know, and people really like it.
I am extremely happy and very grateful every day I walk through the door, and not just for the surroundings, but for the opportunity that I gave myself, and also I showed my children. If you want it that bad, keep trying, keep going for it, and you will get it. Don't give up. And the self-build showed and fulfilled that for me and my children, because I had a terrific time meeting people, building, the excitement, the ups and downs, and now the actual living in this environment is absolutely wonderful. And I do thank my lucky stars that I was given that opportunity to take part.
One time we